Welcome to Trauma Lens Care. My name is Stacey Gagnon, and I'm a nurse, a mom of 7 kids, and I also love coming in and teaching about how adverse childhood experiences or trauma affect our kids and even affect us as an adult. So today, what I want to talk about is something I hear repeated all the time. How many of you have heard kids are resilient or kids are born resilient? A lot of us have heard that, right? I actually remember hearing that in college. And so what I have realized as a foster parent and what I have realized as a parent of children that have been adopted is that children are not born resilient. They are not born with the ability to weather hard things. A good example of this is when I first started fostering, I believed that. I believed that kids would not remember bad things. The younger they were, the better off they were. And so I remember in particular a little baby named Alice that came to live in my home. She had been born in the park. Mom was intoxicated at the time. The police brought her in labor. Alice was resuscitated upon arrival, and then she ended up in the NICU, or the neonatal intensive care unit, for 3.5 months. When I went to pick her up, she was diagnosed with what's called failure to thrive, which is when a child is not gaining weight or thriving, and they don't know why. There's not a medical reason why. And so when I walked in to see this little baby, the nurse told me that at birth, mom had disappeared, there was no dad on record, and that everyone that came in the room needed to put on a mask and gloves because she was on what's called a contact precaution. Well, I knew immediately that this was really bad for a newborn. To not have physical touch, to have lost her mother, to not have the same caregiver. And so we ended up bringing home this baby, and it took a really long time of holding her and talking to her to get her to start growing. I recognized that what happens in infancy and in utero actually affects us greatly. And while the mind might not remember hard things, we say the body keeps score. That means that our mind might not remember something that happened to us when we were 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, but our body remembers. And so we carry trauma on a cellular level. We carry those hurts and pains on a cellular level. And we talked about the ACEs quiz and about how it affects our physical and our mental health when we're older. That's because on a cellular level, our body has remembered and is keeping score. What I want to talk about today is about in utero and up to about the age of 2, why this is the most important time for our kids, why this is the very basement or the foundation for our children being able to manage stress and understand the world. I was speaking in Russia a couple years ago. I actually get to travel around the world and speak about trauma and about these things in Europe and all different places. And I was meeting with a psychologist there, and he said, Stacey, the motherhood bond is the strongest bond in the world, and the trauma bond is the strongest bond in the world. And I looked at him and I said, well, how can it be both? How can the strongest bond in the world be motherhood and the strongest bond in the world be trauma? And so he walked me through something that blew my mind, and I did more research, and I want to share that with you because I believe it to be something we don't talk about. When you think about pregnancy, or when you see someone that's pregnant, or if you've been pregnant, we always look at being pregnant from the perspective of the mother, right? So we have all these apps on our phone, or we have all the books that say, Mom, you might be feeling this, and the baby looks like this. Maybe the baby's the size of a lima bean or a watermelon, or maybe the baby has hair now, or mom is, starting to have stretch marks or starting to, do all of these things physically. But we never think about what is really happening in utero. So that's what I want to talk to you about right now. I want to talk about the birth process from the perspective of a baby so that you can recognize that attachment and a baby's ability to regulate themselves does not start at birth, it starts before. It starts in utero. I'm going to put up a slide now and we're going to show you some of the things that are happening to a newborn before they're born. As the fetus develops, its subconscious mind stores information to prepare it for the environment for which it will be born. A baby is already formulating its set point for stress. We know that by 8 weeks, touch is forming in utero. So by 8 weeks, a baby is already recognizing touch. At 32 weeks, a baby is sensitive enough to feel a single hair brush across its body. They did a great study on touch where they actually had a mom touch her belly and the baby would reach for the mom. But if a stranger touched the mom's belly, the baby would actually move away from the stranger's touch. So in utero, the fetus is already recognizing people. They're already recognizing their mother. Smell is developed by 10 weeks. Now, the sense of smell and the sense of taste are connected. So what we understand is that by 10 weeks, a baby is already tasting and smelling the mother. Smell controls memory. And so a baby, when they're born, already recognizes the smell of their mother and the taste of their mother. Hearing comes online at about 16 to 20 weeks. So a baby can already start hearing and recognizing the mother, and not just the external voice of the mother. They're actually hearing the whoosh of blood through her arteries, her stomach gurgle. They are already recognizing and hearing the most intimate, innermost parts of a person, and that's their main caregiver. So why is this important? What is important about this is that we understand that smell and touch and taste and sound and hearing are already online before 20 weeks. And so here you have a baby who is being absolutely regulated by a mother during pregnancy. They already know their mother in the most intimate way. And now let's talk about the actual process of birth. When a baby is born, they are moved into the birth canal and there's extreme pressure from contractions. And so think about the perspective of a baby. In that moment, they have left the womb where they have been completely regulated. They know the sound of the mother's heart rate. They know the sound of her voice. They know all those things. And so all of a sudden, mom's heart rate increases. Mom might be crying out in pain. They're being moved from the regulated environment into the birth canal. In that moment, a baby believes they may die. In that moment, we have moved from the safe environment into something that is very scary for a newborn. Then the baby is born. And what is naturally supposed to occur is that the baby is placed on the mother's chest. And what's incredible about that is that our bodies were designed in that moment in a woman for capillaries to open on the chest to serve as a temperature regulator for the baby. So the baby's placed on the mother's chest, capillaries open, and her chest warms up to warm the baby. The baby might latch onto the breast, so suddenly the baby knows the taste and smell of their mother. They hear the sound of her voice. So what happened in that moment was the baby went from secure, safe environment, I know my caregiver and my mother, to fear and scariness of being born, to place on the mother and recognize, this is my person, the world is safe, she's meeting my needs. And that is the picture of what is called motherhood and a trauma bond. The bond of motherhood is formulated through trauma. And so when we think about a baby who at that moment is taken into foster care or has to go into a neonatal environment like Alice did, that is a broken bond because the person that they have intimately known more than anybody is not there. And so when we are talking about attachment and we are talking about babies and building a bond with a main caregiver, the biological mother is what the baby is designed to attach to, one caregiver. And when that is broken, there's always going to be loss, and we understand that the body keeps score. So even though this occurred before the baby was able to speak or understand, there's always going to be a component of loss and brokenness because that bond was broken. Children are pre-programmed to form attachments, and that starts in utero. And one of the best ways that I've been able to explain this and how we end up downloading resiliency in our kids is something called red brain, green brain. Let's talk about what I call a green brain baby. So a green brain baby, when they start out in utero, they are supported by mom. And I'm going to start at what we call the basement of the brain, because this is the area of the brain, the bottom part of the brain, is what's being developed in utero to about 18 months of age. And then we start moving up into the upper parts of the brain where all the thinking occurs. So the bottom part of the brain starts developing in utero. And so let's talk about a mom who is excited about having her baby. Now, we have all of these neurocells in our brain when we are born. And within the first few years of life, millions of neural connections occur every second. And these connections are what is building the bottom of our brain. And so neural connections in utero and in a baby, they start with mom, and it's an attachment process. And so mom is maybe supported by family. That would be a green connection, a good connection. Mom gets prenatal care. Mom has a good diet. Mom is excited to have baby. Mom talks to the baby and rubs her belly, right? And you see all these beautiful green connections forming in utero. Then baby is born and mom has baby on her chest and takes baby home and is feeling supported. And then we start the process that's outside of the birth canal, and that's forming attachment through what's called serve and return. Serve and return is a baby cries, and automatically we know that we need to what? Respond to the baby. And so serve and return is baby cries, I'm going to go and find out what's wrong and meet the need of the baby. And so baby cries, mom feeds baby. Baby cries, mom changes baby's diaper. Baby cries, mom holds and cuddles baby, right? And you see this neural connections in cells that are creating this foundation that is telling the baby the world is safe, the world is predictable, and that people can be trusted. Now, every once in a while, mom needs to get a shower and baby cries and mom doesn't come, right? So there might be a red connection every now and then. But what we understand is that at about 18 months, pruning of the brain happens, or apoptosis. And what this is that neural connections that are the strongest will stay. So if most of the time we are meeting the needs of our baby through serve and return, then these green connections will stay and the red ones go away. And what we end up having is the brain of a baby that feels loved, worthy, safe, and that they are in a world that is predictable. Now let's move over to what we call a red brain. Mom is really struggling in life and has no family support. Maybe the baby daddy does not want the baby. Mom can't get prenatal care, she can't afford it. Mom struggles to have a good diet. Mom doesn't know if she wants the baby. Mom is in a relationship where there's domestic violence or yelling. And then the baby is born. Mom loves her baby. Mom's trying to meet her needs. And then we see maybe the baby cries and mom can't get there. Or maybe the baby cries and mom is in a fight with the baby daddy. Or maybe the baby cries and mom is tired and just can't handle it right now. Okay, and the baby cries and maybe mom comes, right? But what we are seeing is a red brain or attachment that is shaky and a foundation that is telling a baby the world's not predictable. If you cry, your needs might not be met. If you cry, things might be scary. Now, what does this have to do when I say children are born resilient? What does that mean across the lifespan? The most important time in a child's life is in utero to 18 months for building foundation. This does not mean that is hopeless. I don't want you to sit there and think, oh my gosh, my child's a red brain child and we can't fix this, because that is not true. There is another period of time where the brain is very plastic and we can reach in and help. And I always believe the brain can be changed even when you're 80 years old. All right? But what we understand when we have not built the basement correctly in a child is what happens later. Their ability to be resilient, or their ability to bounce back when things are hard. Because we talked about that. Children are not born resilient. All right? And so, when we look across the lifespan of a child with a green brain, maybe at the age of 4, their parents got divorced. This child at the age of 4 is going to look back and say, the world is safe, the world is predictable, I can trust people. At the age of 4, same thing happens to a red brain child. He refers back to the basement of his brain and he says to himself, this world is not safe, I cannot trust people, I am not loved and worthy. 8. Maybe the child goes into foster care. He refers back to the green brain. I am loved, the world is safe, I am worthy. Red brain. I'm not loved. This world is not safe or predictable. I have to fend for myself. And we start seeing this pattern. And when we have a brain that is built on a shaky foundation, we struggle and it changes us. It changes how we perceive the world. And what has to happen is that we have to understand, especially as an adult, if you have a red brain, that it changes your perception and how you are able to work within the world. Again, I don't want you to walk away from this class today and think, this is hopeless, my child already has a red brain. Or, this is hopeless, I have a red brain, I know that my parents were absolutely absent when I was young. It doesn't define you. It just helps you to understand that you're going to parent differently, or you're going to react to things differently. And so we know that the cure for this, for red brain, is relationship. One caring adult, because relationships are what change the brain. And so when we know that the neural attachments are saying red, 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 we can move them to green by having relationships with people who help us say, nope, you are cared about. No, you are worthy. You are loved, and things are predictable. That's how we are able to move away from the patterns that were started early. We look at red brain, green brain, and we talk about trauma bond and the motherhood bond. And what we teach is that the cure is in the pain. The cure for trauma and all of those things, ACEs and all of that stuff that we're talking about today, is found in the pain. And the pain is the relationships. Relationships are what caused pain, but they're also what cure pain. Our capacity to destroy one another is matched by our capacity to heal one another. Relationships cause the pain, and they provide the cure. You have the ability to regulate your stress through basic activities such as breathing, moving, and predictable environment. So when you leave this classroom today and you go back to your cell block, I want you to be thinking, wow, okay, first of all, I'm in a predictable environment, right? So that's good. That's positive. However, we also know that jail and incarceration is incredibly stressful. And so what you can do within your cell is practice and work on your breathing. One technique that I like to teach inmates is the 5 breathing technique. And all you do is you can sit and you can close your eyes and you are going to breathe in. Hold for 5 seconds, and then you're going to breathe out. The reality is that as we become more stressed, we actually start getting tense and breathing more shallow. And so we know that breathing helps us to be mindful of what is going on within our body. And so that is something that you can take away from today, is the 5 breathing method. Whenever you're stressed, you can do that, or you can take a period of time to do that. But that's part of what's going to help you. The other part is relationship. Understanding that relationships are the cure for the pain. Thank you so much for joining me today. I just really enjoy teaching and helping understand how our kids are not born resilient. And the next video, we will be talking about windows of tolerance.